Sure has been a blessing to be together for yesterday and today, and I look forward this time to be with you guys. And it's good that we'll be as informal as you want to be in this small group. I'll lay out some things kind of get us thinking, and then hopefully leave plenty of time at the end and just kind of work through some things. And if you have any questions about it, feel free at any point in time to ask questions. You know, it's interesting when you think about fishing for men and you think about fishing for fish. When I say that, and I say imagine fishing for fish, you probably immediately have something that comes to your mind. Probably what you have that comes to your mind does not look like the stilt fishing that is over in an island south of Colombo. And it's about 112 miles south of Colombo. And this is the stilts are prized family possessions. And they pass down the stilt from generation to generation. And this is how families provide for themselves and also create an income. And you probably didn't think about that whenever we talked about picture fishing. Or maybe you don't picture here in Russia a stick and a rock used to break ice so that these two people could fish. Or maybe here we see another group of men. They're much more modern in their ice fishing. They have hand drills that they use. Or when we picture here in a small Bohemian town, we see men, they have a heavy, huge net attached to this rope, and several fishermen will place the rope over their shoulder and their left hand over the rope, pull it down upon their shoulder, and continue to walk forward to pull that net up on the shore. Or in Belgium, the shrimp fishermen, they follow a tradition that's 500 years old, and it's used in Belgian horses. And where we think of in our Western scene of men on horseback here in the U.S., we think of saddlebags. They have big baskets, as you can see on the left and right side. And they will pull that net all the way to the shore. They'll get off the horse, they'll load the shrimp into those baskets. And as I said, that's how they fish for 500 years. Here in China, a man shows off the largest catch of the day in the particular area that he's in. When I said picture fishing, you probably didn't picture at all another Chinese method of fishing here, and it's the cormorants. Those birds are cormorants or cormorants, and those birds are domesticated. He didn't just walk up on two birds that were fighting over a fish and just happened to catch them off guard. Those birds are raised to fish. And so the fishermen send out the birds bring back the fish, and it's a simpler way for them to fish. Here in Havana, we have a man throwing out a net. Here in India, we have a man throwing out a net. And then, maybe more often what you would picture, here we are in Alabama, and it is a bass tournament here in Alabama, early morning hours when they're coming out of the chute and they're going to fish. What do we see in all of this? We see the reality that there are a lot of different ways to fish around this world. And what we see here are some scenes that are very different. They're fishing for different kinds of fish. They're fishing around different continents and in different waters. They're fishing using some very different methods, from nets that have no ropes to nets that are attached to ropes pulled by men, to nets that are attached to ropes that are pulled by horses, even to birds going out instead of casting out a hook. There's so many different methods to catch physical, earthly, animal fish. And yet, the Lord tells us, He uses that example of being a fisherman to say to Peter, James, and John in Luke the 5th chapter, they've been disciples for several months. But this is where He's calling them to step up the game and be apostles. And this is where He's urging them to stop fishing for men, for fish, and now to begin fishing for men. And isn't it interesting that even though there are so many things that are different in the illustration we just used, there's one thing that's very, very similar. Everything we looked at was to catch fish. The goal was to catch fish. What I hope you realize, as we discussed all of this last night and several methods this morning and then some practical things this afternoon, is that if any individual or any congregation hones in on one thing and says, this is where we're putting our stake, and this right here, this one thing is how we're going to do evangelism, you'll miss most of the opportunities in your community. There's never going to be one thing that reaches everyone. Because the truth is, even when you talk about a method of Bible study, as we studied this morning, some great methods of Bible study, the method itself is just one little drop in the bucket of the conversion story. You don't find anyone that participates in the study unless somebody has invited them into that study. You usually don't find anyone that has the opportunity to be invited in study unless somebody that's a Christian has met them and has some kind of interaction with them. I think about a woman one time that I was fortunate to be able to come into her life at a time that several others had already been a part of her life. And her story went like this. And I'll try to remember it the best I can. But there was really so much involvement. And that got me to noticing now through the years, when I see someone come to Christ, I always just try to be aware of how many people, how many Christians had to come in contact with them for them to become a Christian. And it's amazing. You never see anyone brought to Christ by one Christian. If you do, I'd like to hear your story. That's rare. I don't know if that today in America, if that would ever happen. But yet you'll have stories like this. Friends Day in our congregation. We had a lady that would go back to the daycare that she worked at, and she would invite her coworkers every year. This friend would say, "Oh, maybe if I can, I'll come," and never came. Year after year after year. And but one particular year, she said, "You know, I might just come this year." So on the 4th or 5th or 6th year that she invited her, she came. And when she came, what impressed her was how people welcomed her. She said, "You know, I didn't know how I was going to be treated. But I know this. I like that place. That's the kind of place I'd like to go back to." Her child got sick. She had to take her to the emergency room that same week. And when she was at the emergency room, the nurse came out to try to comfort the child and said, Would you like to hold this teddy bear? You can have it. There's a church in our area that gives these to all the kids that are in the emergency room. And so the mother thought, well, that's sweet for that church to do that. And the little girl's holding that teddy bear. And the mother looks down. And the tag on that teddy bear says, "Made with love from the Mount Juliet Church of Christ." And she immediately thought to herself, I'd like to be a person like that just thinks of others' needs, even for people you don't even know. So she came back again. And when she came back again, she was warmly greeted. She even had others in Bible class that talked to her and got to know her. And then there was someone that said to her, "Would you like to study about how to become a Christian?" And eventually she said, "Yes, I would." And I was invited in at that point. We studied. And then she was baptized into Christ. Now, who brought her to Christ? Not that there's any reason for us to try to decipher who it was, but the fact is it was everybody. Everybody was involved in bringing her to Christ. And so when we think about fishing, and we think about, well, we've just got to figure out, the only thing we have to figure out is we have to figure out what Bible study we're going to use. That just doesn't work. There is so much more to reaching a whole community of people than just figuring out the Bible study that we need. Because the reality is, if the people in your community do not like the church, it doesn't matter how many times you ask them for a Bible study, they're going to say no. And so then we have to face the reality of what do people think about the church. Lost and Found was research that was done by Lifeway, which is a Baptist association. What they did was they decided to do research on what people think about, using very general terms, the Christian church in America. What do people think about it? Now, there are a lot of stats we're about to go through, and we're not going to slow down and dissect them all, but what I want you to see from these stats is I simply want you to see what do people in our communities think about the, quote, Christian church. And let me pause here. We'll try to emphasize this later. You realize the old idea of people are going to visit us because we teach the truth does not fly. They don't know the truth, so they don't know if we teach the truth or not. All right, the old idea, well, we're not a denomination, so they're going to visit us because we're the church. They don't know the difference in the church and the denomination, so that's not going to fly. And so then it's really going to bring us back to, number one, why would they visit to begin with? And then number two, why would they visit the second time? They're not going to visit us the second time because we teach the truth. Because even though they come the first time, they hear the truth, they still don't know the truth enough to say, oh, light's going off. That's the truth. That's where I want to go. And so what brings them back for a second and a third and a fourth visit? It's always going to be the love of Christ. The love of Christ is loud. The love of Christ cannot be ignored. The love of Christ is attractive. And so whenever we can go out in our community and we can show our community the love of Christ, then the more times they visit us, the greater the probability is that they will say yes to a Bible study. And by the way, we're going off the assumption that we all are aware of this, but I won't go off that assumption. You know, the greatest probability of a person that you will baptize next will be a visitor. It's not really that common that we baptize adults that have never visited our assemblies. So if you say, in our congregation, we're serious about evangelism, that means you are serious about guests. You're doing everything you can do to make sure that the guests have a huge, positive first impression so that they'll come back the second time, the third time, and the fourth time. Because sometime in their coming back, they're going to say yes to a Bible study. And so if we're not really serious about guests, we're not serious about being effective in our evangelism. And so here's some statistics about what people in our generation today think about the church. And by the way, what they were especially wanting to do as part of this research is they were wanting to see if younger people in our communities think different from older people. And so you'll notice this breakdown. All right, so those who are somewhat or strongly agree are the answers we're about to look at, their views of the church. The church is full of hypocrites, people who criticize others for doing the same things that they do themselves. From 20 to 29, 2/3 of all your neighbors say that's who the church is. That's why they're not so quick to say, oh, I'd love a Bible study with you. It's not maybe that they're anti-Bible, and it may be that they're not anti-God. It may be they're anti-hypocrites. And they believe, 2/3 believe, that hypocrites are filling the church. And isn't it interesting, if you go over the age of 30, 3/4 of them believe that that's who fills the church is hypocrites. I believe I can have a good relationship with God without being involved in church. This is probably one of the most staggering statistics to me. Not that it's high. What's staggering to me is that it's this high. Let that sink in. 9 out of 10 of our neighbors, they believe that they can have a close relationship with God and it has nothing to do with the church. So to them, church is just optional. That's why they'll say things like, well, I'm just not big on organized religion. But in their mind, they really mean it. They're sincere when they say, but I have a great relationship with God. Now, we can say, that doesn't make sense. To them, that makes sense. So that's why they're reluctant to say, sure, I want to study. They don't want to study. They got everything they want. In their mind, they've got God, and they don't have this crazy organized religion that's full of a bunch of hypocrites. I think Christianity today is more about organized religion than about loving God and loving people. I think this one really smacks us in the face a lot of times. How many times when we start studying with somebody, the very first thing we try to convince them is everything about our organized religion? Now, religion's not bad. God's the one that designed religion. But when we forget that there is so much more to Christianity than just the organized religion, we are falling to prey to where our community is saying, why not us? Shouldn't there be something more to Christian living than just your organized church? Or is that all there is? You just make sure you get your organized church right and nobody else matters? And so 77%, 2/3, almost 80%, 8 out of 10 are saying, yeah, they're much more concerned about themselves and how they're organized than anybody else. Christians get on my nerves. Almost half of 2029 say that they do. 44%, 30 and above. Now, spirituality. Those who somewhat strongly agree, people who attend Christian church are generally more spiritual than those who do not attend. This is the second one that surprises and convicts me, okay? Now let this sink in. So if someone attends a Christian church, they are generally more spiritual than those who do not attend church. Only 40% of the 20 to 29 crowd say that people that go to church are more spiritual. And only 1/3 say that of people over 30. Why do those people over 30 say that? Well, let's just say they're 40, 50, 60 years old. If they're 60 years old, they've been adults for 40 years. They've been in the workplace with Christians for 40 years. They've had neighbors on the left and right side of them for 40 years. And you know what they figured out? They figured out that the people that do not call themselves Christians are a lot easier to get along with. And they're something. That's their something. They're figuring out that the nice people on this earth, the people that will go the extra mile for you, the people that will look after them, the people that are not religious, are the other people that are not religious. And so here you are out in the world, you don't have an association with a Christian church, and you say, at work, you say, my father died this past week. Who's going to reach out to you? You're someone in the world, you've announced it at work, my grandfather died. It's going to be somebody in the world that reaches out to you, or it's going to be a Christian? Probably a lot of times it's going to be the guy that on Friday night drinks a beer with you. And then on Monday comes over and brings flowers to your house and says, I'm sorry your dad passed away. And then they're saying, now on this side of my house, those people go to church every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. And my dad died and they didn't say anything to me. One thing, the people that I know that are the most spiritual are the people that don't go to church. It really, really becomes convicting. I'm not saying I agree with all this. I'm saying that this is some very sophisticated study. This wasn't just light surveys. This is a very sophisticated study that says, hey, we live in a community where the people around us believe that the most spiritual people in our community, and keep in mind, they wouldn't define spiritual exactly the way we would define spiritual either. But in their mind, someone that is spiritual is going to be somebody that doesn't go to church. Are they open to outreach? So in other words, at this point, you may be saying, was there even anything that we can do to reach our community? This is real favorable. This is pretty favorable here. So they somewhat strongly agree with these things. If someone wanted to tell me what she or he believed about Christianity, I'd be willing to listen. Isn't that awesome? 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 of 20 to 29-year-olds say, sure, I'll give you an honest word. What is it that you have to offer? 75% of those 30 and older say, I'm willing to listen. I would be willing to study the Bible if a friend asked me to. So almost 2/3 of 20 to 29 say that. 42%. Now think about what we're saying here. We're saying study the Bible with. We're not saying if you wanted to have a conversation with them, they're saying I would sit down and study the Bible if somebody would ask me. And we say, I can't get Bible studies. I just can't find anybody who's willing to study the Bible. Well, according to their survey, there are people that are willing to study the Bible. You just got to ask them. If the church presented truth to me, and this is key, in an understandable way that relates to my life now, I would attend. I want to balance this. And I know you guys may not know me well, but I promise you, I'm not out in left field somewhere. But I'm just saying that in our preaching and our teaching, we've got to balance the fact where we do not preach all the time on the organization of the church and the worship of the church. We have got to put some real life matters in there of how do you live the Christian life? How do you live the Christian life at work? How do you live the Christian life with enemies? How do you live the Christian life with your family? How is it that God can bless our life in day-to-day living? I think one of the highest compliments I've ever been paid was this girl came out, and she was kind of a funny girl as you got to know her, and praise God, she was baptized several weeks after this. But she came out one week, and the only place she had ever attended were places that were kind of like high churches with great ceremony, like Episcopalians and things like that. And she visited us one Sunday, and I can't remember the story, like who invited her or something. But she popped in one Sunday, and I didn't see her after service of that first Sunday. The second Sunday, she came right up the middle aisle. She would, beeline right where I stand after the service. She came right up to me and she said, I just want to tell you thank you. I've been to this church now for 2 Sundays and I'm experiencing something I have never experienced in my life. So, what's that? And she said, you actually learn things here that you can live during the week. She said, last Sunday when I was here, she said, I went around my job Monday and I told all of my co-workers things they could do that I learned here Sunday about how they could live a better life. And she said, I just want to thank you I never knew that the Bible could actually be lived on a day-to-day basis. And I can tell you another example of another young woman who's about 25, 26 years old, a teacher in our school system. Very similar story, where she said the reason she kept coming back was she had never been to a church where the Bible was taught in a way that you were expected to live it. Listen, this crowd right here, they're hungry. Many of them are hungry to find something that's actually there, to find something that they can learn today and live tomorrow. And so we've got to get to where it relates in their life. Now, does the church relate? Absolutely. Does worship relate? Absolutely. But we've got to give the whole package of what we need to reach these folks. If people at church cared about me as a person, I would be more likely to attend. That's going to be huge of what we're talking about. What time are we supposed to quit?
1:50.
Okay. And so, this is going to be really the heart of a lot of what we're going to get to today. Let me go ahead and throw it out right now. Who should be the best neighbor in the neighborhood? The church. Now think about it. I'm not talking about me and you individually. Now, individually, well, me too. But I'm saying, just like Adamville, Church of Christ sits right here, and there are neighbors all around this church. Some of them are businesses. Some of them are houses. Who should be the best neighbor in the neighborhood? The Adamville Church of Christ ought to be the best neighbor in the neighborhood. Mount Juliet Church of Christ ought to be the best neighbor in the neighborhood. People ought to know, you know what? I don't know a lot about that church up there, but I know they care about me. If we could ever communicate that, then we can start reaching our community. All right, so consider these slides again. Ask yourself, why is it that so many simply do not like the church? They believe that it's full of hypocrites. They believe that they can have a relationship with God without the church. Now, we don't have time to heavily develop this, but you'll see what I'm saying. Why is it that they're so anti-church? Like, why are they pro-God and anti-church? Haven't we showed them something that they don't like? Well, the previous slide, somebody has shown them a bunch of hypocrites. At least that's their understanding. I think Christianity is more about the organized religion than still loving people. That's why people struggle with loving the church. They believe that people that go to church are not spiritual. In other words, they have a hard time living. Barnett did a deep research back several years ago where he went over the major areas of morality in America. And remember, there wasn't a huge spread. Like when you looked at the average American, like the use of profanity, it wasn't that big a difference whether or not you were a Christian or not. Would you support abortion or not? It wasn't that big a difference. That was one of the largest ones. But he just went through all these moral issues. And there just wasn't that big a difference of whether or not you went to church or whether or not you didn't. That's what the world is saying. The world is saying, I don't see a big spiritual difference here. As a matter of fact, I see a lot more love among people that are not Christians than people that are. And if they just care for me for a person. Okay, so why is it that people do not like the church? Is it because we have fulfilled Galatians 6 and 10? Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all. Let us do good to all, especially those who are the household of faith. Is that why some in the community do not love us? Because we really have done good to all of them. Too many times when we in a congregation say service, what we really mean is serve us. We'll get to this saying in just a minute, but I'll go ahead and leap out on it now. Probably in 2009, either in 2008 or 9, I wish we were smart enough to ask this question, to think it up, but we weren't smart enough to think it up on our own. But we did start asking this question back several years ago. If the Mount Juliet Church of Christ ceased to exist today, would anyone in the community notice or care? That changed us as a congregation. If the Mount Juliet Church of Christ ceased to exist today, would anybody in the community notice or care? You take if we just think about if our members went to our doors, to our church, but I know the church building is not the church, but just think with me for a moment. If we did no longer meet as, well, I'll just use us as an example. If the Mount Juliet Church of Christ shut down and just said, hey, all members are going to have to be dispersed. You think if everybody shows up tomorrow morning and the doors are locked, it's barred up, this church no longer meets. Can you imagine in our congregation? Can you imagine your congregation in tears? People would go home, it'd be like a death. It'd be like, this can't be happening. We got to do something. This is the worst thing that could ever happen on this earth. But who else is going to be mourning? Is it only me, us? Or would there be people out in the community that say, wow, that was such a good group of people. I tell you what, we're going to miss them in this community. They were the best neighbors in this community. They made a huge impact on this community. We really, as a community, have had a huge loss because that congregation is no longer meeting. And our problem that we found out when we started wanting to answer that question of if the Mount Juliet Church of Christ ceased to exist today, we may be no scared. When we started answering that question, we have about 40 to really about 45 deacons. And within those 45 deacons, we have about 50 to 100 ministries. I'm sorry, we have 45 to 50 ministries. We're pretty big ministries, and they do a lot, a whole lot. This is what was shocking to us. We started evaluating every one of those ministries. It wasn't hardly anything in 50 ministries that we did for anybody in our community outside the walls. We did things, benevolence, outside. We did things in a jail ministry. And of course we did mission work. But it was embarrassing to ourselves. And so when we started thinking about what are we going to do to let this community know that we love them, we found ourselves starting from scratch. Do they not like the church because we have fulfilled Matthew 22, 36 through 39? And not only do we love God with all of our being, but the second greatest commandment, that we love our neighbor as ourselves. If the church loves the neighbors around them as the church loves herself, would the church be so hated? Now, keep in mind, I understand that when people are convicted of sin, not all are going to love it. I know what John 3 teaches, that the light reveals their darkness and they don't want anything to do with it. Jesus taught also later in the book of John that they first hated me and they're going to hate you. Understand that. We're not talking about the dislike from the doctrinal one. We're talking about the dislike from being honest with ourselves. We just haven't been good neighbors. We haven't loved them as we love ourselves. We haven't fulfilled Galatians 6 and 10 to do good to all men. And that's entirely on us. And so, when we think about even the story of the Good Samaritan, have we as a church fulfilled just the teachings of the Good Samaritan to our neighbors? And if we did, surely they wouldn't think the same that they think of us now. And then when we think of Matthew the 25th chapter, we looked at this last night, a little bit in one of the lessons last night. And notice here, we've got going out to those who need food, who need a drink, who need to be taken in, to those who need clothes, to those who need a visit, and to those who are in prison. And are we doing those things? And if we did those things, wouldn't that change the perception? If we really did go to the hungry, thirsty, strangers, naked, sick, and in prison, this is the question that I was telling you before that we ask. In other words, if the congregation ceased to exist, would anyone notice or would they care? If we act like Christ's body, we wouldn't be disliked. Now, notice what I'm saying. If we really were Christ's body, not just calling ourselves that, if we really did what Christ taught us to do, they might dislike us. But they won't dislike us because we didn't love them, we didn't serve them, we didn't give them, we didn't respect them, and we didn't reach out to them. At least if they didn't like us, it would be, I don't agree with what they teach. They're very compassionate. They're very generous. They always are serving us. But I don't agree with everything they teach. That'd be a lot better. That would be a biblical reason to not be liked. So the question is, are we putting the out and outreach? Are we reaching out? From this, we tried to start several things, and I'm not saying every one of these things are things that you guys ought to be doing. I'm just giving you just a list of things that we've tried to work on a little bit, and they're constantly fluid and changing, and And I might add this right at the very beginning of what we're talking about here. I think it'd be very foolish to take this and say, we're just going to copy somebody else's. Like, take this list and say, we're going to copy this because in your community, this may not be the needs. In other words, I hope what you see from what we've studied so far this afternoon, our task is not to come up with some kind of model. Our task is really to get in our community and figure out what they need. What is it that they need? And what your community may need may not look anything like this. And the truth is, it's time for us at Mount Juliet to stop and evaluate this again. And I think now, after we've done this a little while, we can probably come up with probably even some better things. But these are some examples of what we did. In January, we try to have a servants' breakfast where we invite, like the firemen, the policemen, the ambulance workers, even the public workers, from the water department and sewage department and all that. And they just come and go. They can eat breakfast with us for about a 2-hour period of time. And every so often we stop, we have a prayer, and we just thank them for what they do. We don't pound them with a lesson. We don't pull the hey, we baited you in here with breakfast and now we're going to trick you. And we don't do that at all. It's just simply say, we thank you for serving us. And then in February we go down to our healthcare center. And we have some little baskets, bags that have been made up by some of the children, and families go down and they spend time with each individual member of the healthcare center there, and we go down there each month for a service, and so there's a relationship already built there. In March, what we try to do, we have a huge Little League park. I'm told that we have one of the largest ones in the U.S. I don't know if that's the case, but we'll have probably 2,000 kids that play in our Little League park. And so they have a work day, and it is a huge endeavor. And so what we've tried to do is get some of our members that don't even have kids to go down, wear Mount Juliet t-shirts, and then we'll also set up a little tent-like deal, and we'll give out water there, as well as work, just to say to the community, hey, we love you, and we want to serve you. We have our spring egg hunt, which of course is a great way to invite people on our property, and of course kids will come and parents will love it, and it's a wonderful way for them to get to know Christians, and that way when they visit with us for the first time, they've already had those introductions with some of them. Also in April, we started a single mom car care clinic. Now what also is real neat about reaching out in the community, you know how 1 Corinthians 12, the body is made up of many members? And what we have found out is that you talk about getting people in your congregation that you think, well, you just can't get them to do anything. You start reaching out in some of these ways, they come. The first Sunday we announced that we wanted to do this, and this was the plan. We're gonna we know that single moms that's the highest rate of poverty. Is single mothers, and we also know that one of the things that they need desperately is a dependable car, and we also know one of the things they neglect the most often is their car. And so we said it just makes sense that if this is a group in our neighborhood that needs help, and this is an item that we can help them with, it'd be huge. And so what we want to do is we want to go in and change their oil, and we have several mechanics in our congregation, and just let them look at the car, and that way they can go back and say, hey, you've got a belt on there that it really needs to be replaced. And I know they're being honest with them because there's no money involved and there's no take to this garage. And then also we decided, somebody said, well, let's wash and detail. And so now the car comes back looking just amazing. We have guys that even pull out dents and all this stuff. It comes back. And while they're doing that, somebody said, well, let's pamper the moms while they're in there. So then the moms are getting their nails done and everything. And so they come in and they spend about an hour and a half. Their kids, people got their kids and taking care of them. And it's real common for the moms to cry when they leave. It's very common to say, we've never had anybody to do anything like this for us. And so it's just amazing. I remember walking one mom and her kid back to the car, and the little boy looked up and he said, hey, of course he didn't know me. I mean, we just met that day, He looks up, he says, hey. He said, hey. He said, I love this church. And I thought, okay, that's good. That's what we're trying to instill within you. We love you. We want you to love the church. And so what I was going to say, though, when you talk about involvement within your congregation, that first Sunday we made that announcement, not at the same time. We had 2 different mechanics come up to us that very same Sunday and say, hey, it sounded like they were mimicking each other. Both of them said these words. told them, said, hey, there's not a lot I can do around this place, but I would love to help those moms out by changing their oil. Count me in. The body's made up of different members. And if we serve the way we're supposed to be serving, every member is going to be needed. So it may be that the reason we don't have some members doing as much as what we might think they ought to be doing, it may be because as leaders we're not giving them the opportunity to serve in the way that God has given them the ability to serve. And so that's pretty neat too. Friends Day, we build in.
How did you find best to advertise that? What did you guys do to advertise that?
Okay. Well, the most effective way of evangelism is relationships. So we intentionally chose this way. There's probably a lot of other ways to do it, but we chose postcard size advertisements, and for two reasons. We can control how many postcards go out. And we say on the postcard that, like for us, we have 24 slots open. So, and we're real clear on that. We can change oil and do this for the first 24 single moms. And so we can control how many. So what we do is the first week we make print 100 cards. And this is the relationship part. And then we say to our family, our church family, is we say, hey, do you have somebody in your family? Do you have somebody at work that you know this would be a huge benefit, and you already have a relationship built with them? Because what's going to be neat if that relationship gets strengthened. Here you're working at work with a single mom, and right now she doesn't want to talk church with you at all. Well, come next Monday morning, she's going to have an entirely different impression of church. So then we turn around and we invite her to bring her kids, because it's always single moms. Bring your kid to VBS.
Well, that's it, 'cause I was thinking, you might have some sort of limit. You can be overwhelmed the first day, but you're better off by finding people you know first. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so, and we also have them scheduled time. They have to call for an appointment because, it takes a while to change oil, detail a car, and take care of them. So the way we have it set up, we evaluate, we say, okay, we can do 1 every 15 minutes. I believe it ends up because we have two different lanes going, so it's really 1 every 30 minutes. But we have, two lanes going of oil changes, and so we have, we stagger it like that through the day. So when they call, we're like, hey, we got an 8:15 appointment. Is that good? Sure. Or okay, we got 10:15, and they pretty well keep their appointments. They'll miss them a little bit, but throughout the day, the majority of them will keep their appointment. And that just goes to show you how much they appreciate it. If it wasn't a big deal, they make an appointment. You would say, because they don't have anything invested. They're not going to lose any money, but it really is a big help. All right, we try to build in.
Do you furnish the oil and filters?
We do. We've actually had 1 year Lexus of Cool Springs just gave us. We didn't even ask for it. They gave us the oil. Matter of fact, they may have even given. It's interesting when people hear what you're doing, they love it. I'm not saying you'll get everything given to you, but different years we've had different things given and we haven't even asked. We had the manager at the Lexus of Cool Springs. He's not a member of the church. He heard what we were doing. He said, "Not only want to give the oil," he said, "Would you mind if I come over and help change the oil for a little while?" I'm like, "No, come on over. We love that." And so that's been neat. But yeah, it is our way to give to them. And so we buy that. The second thing, the next thing on this list is we have 4 days built in. And I'm not saying the magic is 4 days. I'm just saying that's our model. You guys may want to build in 6 or 2 or whatever. But you know how you want to build an environment that people are comfortable inviting others to church? Like, you want to build an environment so that when you have a member that lives on the street and somebody moves in the house next to them, the question is, are they going to walk down and invite them to church? Well, if you don't, as a church, if you don't build that environment, they're not going to do it. And so our goal is, if we are asking our people to make invitations 4 times a year, they ought to start doing it naturally over time. In other words, it's like a maturity process. You push them at first, and then they do it on their own after a little while. And so what we do is we pick out 4 days where we're really going to make announcements. Hey, please, everybody invite 5 people. Everybody. Be praying about, be inviting. And so one of those days is Friends Day. One of those days, and that'll be in the spring. One of the days will be Family Day, and that'll be in the fall. And by the way, don't mix your Friends and Family Day because you're burning good opportunities. If you'll have those separate on Friends Day, they'll invite their friends who aren't Christians. And if you'll have Family Day, they'll invite their family that's not Christians. Now, here's what they won't do. If you have it on the same day, they won't invite both friends and family. They just won't do it. Because they'll say, I can't host that many people. I'm going to have more people come to church than what I can take care of. And so you're burning an opportunity if you have those two together, in my opinion. And so we have those two separate, spring, fall. And then, of course, we have Vacation Bible School. And then we have a Bible class Census Day that I don't think is on this, but it's also, of course, the time where we make a huge push to get people, to invite people. Also, I might just go ahead. I know we're going to run out of time here in just 5 more minutes, but I want to show you this, how it changes mindset. The congregation where I'm at, we hardly do anything different just to do something different. And I can illustrate that in a lot of ways. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying everybody needs to be where we are, but I'm just saying, if you're looking to the left, we're not anything close to the left. And so what I'm about to give you is an illustration of how we would not have ever have done this if it would not have been for that question. When we started asking that question, what if we cease to exist today? Would anybody in the community notice or care? And are we the best neighbor in the neighborhood? Well, we've been having Friends Day for a lot of years, and we've had great success at Friends Day. But we have to think, what could we do to make our Friends Day even more into the community? And we said, why not go and worship with them? Take worship to the community. And so we rented a pavilion at our little city park. Charlie Daniels, that's where Mount Juliet's where he's from. So we have Charlie Daniels Park, which is our little city park. And we rented the pavilion on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock. We take 500 or 600 chairs down there. We cook enough food for anybody that's in the park. It's just hot dogs. We cook hot dogs, and the congregation brings the side items. And we tell everybody to bring plenty, because anybody's in the park, we're going to invite them. And so we get down there, and we go around and we invite them. And we say, hey, we're going to have a worship service over here. We'd love for you to join us. If you don't want to come to that, we're going to be eating, and we've got plenty of food for you afterwards. We'll be worshiping at 4, and a little bit right before 5, we'll be eating. Just come over and join us for anything. And after that, we're kids will be playing some games. You bring your kids over, any of the games, we'd love to have you. It's amazing. It's amazing the goodwill that has brought. About 2 years ago, someone sent me, Monday morning, they sent me a copy of a Facebook post. And she said, hey, I want you to see what one of the girls that had taken her child to the park yesterday that we met. And she knew nothing about the Mount Juliet Church of Christ. But she went home and she posted on her Facebook. She said, just had one of the best evenings I've had in a long time. I forget her child's name, me, and whatever her child's name was. We went down to Charlie Daniels Park just to hang out Sunday afternoon, and we ended up hanging out and playing games with some of the best people I've ever met. That's what breaks that stereotypical, I don't like the church. Now, has that woman visited us yet? Not that I know of. But here's what's awesome. I want you to think of the timeline. Someone from the time they're born to the time they die, if they live an average time. I think everybody at some time in their life has a window where they are open to learning more about God. That's only a window. I don't think they're open solid. They have windows where they're open to learning about God. Here's my goal. That if anybody lives in the Mount Juliet community, and we're not there yet, but if anybody lives in the Mount Juliet community, whenever that window opens, that they turn to their child, they turn to their spouse, and they say to them, I know you're going to think I'm crazy. Well, let's go to church Sunday. What? You want to go to church? Yeah. My granddad used to take me when I was a kid. I love church. And we need to take our kids to church. Let's go to church. I never thought I'd ever hear you say that. Well, will you do it? Sure. If you want to go, I'll go. Okay, great. We'll go to church Sunday. Hey, honey, what? Where are we going to go? Now, those conversations happen in our communities. Those conversations happen regularly in our community. And here's the question. When they've got to answer, where are we going to go? Will our congregation's name ever be the answer? And if it's not, that's where we're really feeling it. Stay Safe campaign, we go to every door, and we've done it also at home. We pass out that study book that is it's just kind of a little lesson that somebody can study on their own to bring themselves to Christ with the study of God's Word. There's a brochure There may be a DVD in here, 4 sermons that's in there. And this is something that if you want to do something at your home, I know we're out of time, so I'll just leave you with this. I would encourage you to multiply your efforts. If you're going to have a huge vacation Bible school that you're going to advertise, why not advertise along with it the other things that's happening that summer? Why not put whatever the Sunday morning series is going to be for July, advertise that in there. And if you're going to have any kind of seminar for adults in the summer. And what's interesting is a lot of times with just a little bit more planning, you can put together a stream of things that when you go, you got so much more to offer to whoever they are.
But the elders in your congregation, though, had to put their stamp of approval on, how encouraging were the elders for the congregation? How often were they up front with the congregation and supporting these ideas?
Okay, the elders were not probably up in front of the congregation as much as, but you're right. It took a lot of discussion within elders and ministers meetings to have this discussion of like why would we do worship in the park at Charlie Daniels? Are we doing that just because we're trying to be a cool church, or is there a reason? And that kind of talk was honest around the table. And whenever we threw out, and everybody was honest. And here's some cons we see, but here's some pros we see. Then we got up in front of the congregation, and we just mentioned this is why we're doing it. And you know what was amazing? The first Sunday afternoon we had it, the amen was said. After it was probably 70 years and plus were the first 3 that came up to me right when the amen was said, and they all said things like, "This was one of the best days we've ever had." Another one said, "Don't tell me we've got to wait a year to do this again. Can we figure out a way to do this every 6 months?" And so it was amazing also how, and then we had a lot of people plus membership. And we put on, we have them to fill out, give us information about themselves. And several now, when we'll say, "Why did you choose to Mount Juliet Church Christ?" Several, the answer is, because you care about the community you live in, that kind of stuff. I want to be in a place that reaches the people that they live with. That's the kind of stuff that, and so, believe it or not, it was harder for us as leadership. And I'm not putting myself as an elder, but I'm just saying, I wrestle with it too. But as ministers and elders, it was harder for us. And once we were clear on what our focus and our vision and our convictions were from the Word of God, because we got to do something with those texts we looked at. Those texts are not, the Lord did not command us to just be good to each other in the church and let the world be condemned. We don't care. And so when we get fired up about evangelism, but evangelism is speaking the truth in love. That love is supposed to be more than just, did I choose loving words? Am I a loving person to the community around me?
But at one point did the elders say, "Here's what we're going to support," to the congregation?
Down that list?
Yeah.
We put together, we said this is what a year could look like.
Okay.
And we threw out, and I honestly don't remember if any of them got mixed, but about 3 or 4 of us ministers, about probably 3 of us sat down, and we brainstormed a lot of things that we said we could do things like this if we were going to serve our community. And I really don't remember if any got turned down, but it wouldn't have been uncommon if they did. For the elders to look and say, and part of it may just be, hey, this is enough. We've got enough right now.
Yeah.
Like probably the hardest one to wrestle with was probably the work day down at the baseball park. That was probably the hardest one. Because people look at it and say, well, if it's not benevolence and it's not evangelistic, why are we doing it? And well, we're supposed to love our neighbor, and we've got 2,000 kids. And a lot of them are our very own kids that are down there. But it's also our neighbor's kids. And why would we not give volunteer help to go down there and say, hey guys, put on a t-shirt that says Mount Juliet Church of Christ and go down there and help your community out. And it was just a new way of thinking. And it's been a blessing. All right, we're past time.